Good evening, friends. This is Wasim Ahmed with you, and today I came up with a very important topic for especially those people who are going for exam on 28th and later on. So, guys, this belongs to NEBOSH Examiner's reports feedback. We just got a feedback from NEBOSH on previous results, and as discussed earlier, the result was very bad. Not only IGC 1, IG2 also many people failed. So this result which we are going to discuss and these tips are mainly related to IG2 report where people failed because of small mistakes, and we will be looking at some of the checklist. You need to make sure that all the points in that checklist are meeting your requirements in the report. So this is very important. I would recommend you that you should not submit your report before making sure that these small issues are fixed in your report or not. Even if there is a small mistake, small issue, small omission in your report, then for sure you are not going to get passed in that report. And it is always a good idea to pass NEBOSH IGC exam in first attempt. Rather, you are hanging in the air for a long time, booking for exams and then second attempt and third attempt. So just stick to the video till end, and we'll be discussing what are those points for which you need to take care of. So guys, I'm sure you might be getting this checklist from your learning partner from where you have booked. If you have not given this checklist, ask your learning partner to give you this checklist because this is a part of your IG2 report, and all the criteria written in this checklist. You need to make sure that point by point you make sure that these criteria are properly met in your report. It is very important to check your reports whether it is meeting with all of these criteria or not. I have seen in the results that some people had made very good reports, very attractive reports, but a single criteria was not met as compared to this checklist, and they got a refer. So, why to go for a refer, guys, for a small mistake? You need to make sure that all of these criteria are met, and these are the things which we will be discussing ahead in the video, one by one, that what is the requirement, what you need to do to pass. So guys, looking at the first part of this checklist, which is description of the organization and methodology used, there are certain points you need to make sure that you have given this information adequately in your report. So for example, the description, which may include the name of the organization. You need to provide the name of the organization on which you are making risk assessment report. However, NEBOSH give you some privilege and they tell you if you don't want to mention the name of actual name of your organization, you can come up with any name. For example, ABC organization or XYZ construction organization or whatever. You have that privilege from NEBOSH to hide the name of your organization if there is a conflict of interest, if there is a reason behind that your organization, their name should not be there because of the confidentiality reasons. You can hide this name, but at least you need to provide some name. Secondly, the site location is very important, and you need to make sure that you are providing them adequate information because the examiner doesn't know the location and the area. So in the location and in the area, you need to discuss. For example, you are doing a risk assessment in a construction organization. So you are going to do risk assessment on excavation. So you need to be clearly defining that this is a site which is mainly for a residential complex or a building or something, and inside the site there are many activities going on, out of which one is excavation activity. You have selected excavation site to do your risk assessment, and the site is this much long, this much wide, this much deep. Just imagine that if you are going to check some of the report, you need to be very well aware of the surroundings and areas and all that. so that you put yourself in that environment and you identify some of the hazards. So same is the case with examiner. Examiner is totally blind. What kind of site is this on which you are doing risk assessment? So he need to know more about the areas, the site location. So it should be mentioned in your report. The excavation is situated in the middle of the construction area. It is 3 meter deep, 5 meter wide, 10 meter long, whatever. You need to provide certain details on the location itself. Not only internal location, you need to provide some detail on the external location also. For example, if the location of this organization is in north of Saudi Arabia, south of UAE, you need to talk a little bit on that also to make sure that location is very much clear. Then number of workers employed. There are two things you need to keep in mind for this point. That first you need to highlighting total number of people working for the organization. Then on this site, how many workers are there, and then on the location you are going to do risk assessment, how many workers are there. If there is any handicapped worker, if there is any special need worker, you need to highlight that also in the report. So this is important also. And the general description include products manufactured, services offered, type of activities, shift patterns. So for example, if the organization is involved in construction activities, you need to be clearly defining it that the organization is involved in a construction activity, and some of the activities going on site are excavations, working at height, rigging and lifting and all that, just to give a brief idea to the examiner what kind of activities are going on. And shift patterns, you have to clearly define that there are 2 shifts working or 3 shifts working. General timings for the shift is from 5 in the morning to 5 in the evening, and then the night shift comes from 5 in the evening to 5 in the morning, and there is no working on the weekends or all that. You need to briefly define this thing so that the examiner get an idea out of your report. Then methodology used to include sources of information, who was consulted and how you decided on the additional control measures. So you need to provide here in the methodology your sources of information which you use to complete this report. So guys, always keep in mind there are many sources of information. First of all, you need to highlight that you have visited hse.gov website, you have visited ILO website to get information on the risk assessment. Then you visited the site also, and maybe you can write I paid 2 to 3 visits to the site to do physical risk assessment on the site, to identify the hazards, to identify the controls in place already. And you can highlight here that I would like to thank the HSE manager of the organization or HSE engineer of the organization who supported me, who helped me in providing certain information. So documentary information is information, documentary source of information can include your book, these websites which we discussed, and the company's internal documents which are the previous risk assessments, accident records, company health and safety policies, procedures and all of those things. Then the physical information include interviewing people or physically going to the site and observing people. So you can write down here in this part that you have visited the organization 2 times to identify some of the issues at site actually which are there present on the site. Also, you interviewed the top management group, 1 person, you interviewed somebody from the middle management group, and you interviewed somebody as a working level professional down there in the organization. So these are 2 important sources, and the third source you can mention that for looking for the controls later on, you consulted your study material, which is your IG2 and GC3 materials you have studied. Also, you consulted some of the documents from different websites, external sources of information. So you need to briefly inform the examiner from where you get information What was your methodology to do this risk assessment? So this is very important, guys. You need to make sure that you are providing adequate information to the examiner. If examiner feels that he is not given adequate information, he will simply write on the column, second column, criteria not met. And if there is one criteria not met in your report, I'm sorry to say you will get referred. Uh, Guys, the second part of this risk assessment report, you need to provide minimum 10 hazards using five categories, five different categories. Now, people always have ambiguity. What are the categories? What are the hazards and all that? So, category is a major category. If you are not sure, you can go to your GC2 book and see all those major categories of hazards. For example, you had one topic there, chemical hazards. This is a major category. And out of chemical hazards, you can go down inside deeper and you can see what are the issues related inside, what are the hazards, maybe toxic gases, maybe toxic chemicals, corrosive chemicals used in the organization. You need to take two hazards from each category and you need to complete 10 hazards, or totally you need to write 10 hazards using different categories, but make sure that you are taking all of these hazards from different categories, showing the examiner that yes, you are providing variety of hazards. You are not sticking to one kind of category, one type of hazards and all that. There is a variety of hazards. For example, electrical, fire, these are major categories, and you are taking two hazards from each category to make it 10 hazards for your report. Just make sure that you have completed 10 hazards in total. Each column of the risk assessment table has been completed for each of the identified hazards. So there are 5-6 columns in your risk assessment. You need to complete all of these columns for each of the item you mentioned in your hazard. For example, you have mentioned some corrective actions, some additional controls. Maybe you mentioned 4 additional controls to reduce the risk level. Now for each control, there is a column who is responsible, what is the time frame and all that. So you are not going to write general one type of thing only in the last column. You will mention step by step with each control who is responsible. Maybe if they are even the same people, maybe if the HSE manager or HSE coordinator is responsible for certain job, you need to mention it again and again with each point so that it is clear for the examiner that for this part this guy is responsible. Also, you need to provide time frame for each additional action. So I have seen in some reports, uh, in the second column where which is who might be harmed and how, some people have written general that anyone who is involved in the activity will get harmed. The examiner is not happy with this answer. He wants to know who are the anyone. For example, if you are talking about an excavation hazard, for example, then who are involved in excavation? In excavation, you have the heavy duty equipment operators, excavator operators, you have general labor, you have area supervisor. So you need to clearly define all of these professions who are going to be involved in that activity or going to get harmed out of that. And for excavation, you have to think a little wider. General public, people passing, vehicles passing, they might also be falling in the excavations and all that. So you need to be realistic, guys. General information is not accepted with NEBOSH as per the results came and as per the reports they have issued now. So you need to make sure that you are providing detailed information with each hazard, with each point, completing all the columns accordingly. Part 3 is prioritize three actions with justification for the selection. Okay. So I always recommend you while making your risk assessment in a draft format, you need to make up your mind from the beginning that these are the three areas which I am going to highlight later on, because this is also a very critical area. Out of those 10 hazards, 3 hazards you need to select for which you are going to provide some recommendations, and then you need to make sure that these recommendations are met accordingly. 3 actions you have to select out of your whole report, and you need to provide justification for these 3 actions, why you have selected these 3 actions in a report, uh, and you have to justify those 3 actions using moral, legal, and financial arguments. Okay. So we all know, for example, you have suggested that the excavation should be barricaded with the physical barrier, and this physical barrier should be provided by the employer around the excavation. Then you need to provide moral, legal, financial justification. So moral justification is that you need to prevent people falling in the excavation, to avoid injuries, to avoid illnesses, to avoid fatalities and all that. This is a moral justification. Then the legal justification, as per the as per CLO as per ILO C155 R164, this is one of the requirement that employer has to provide safe workplaces, and in this case, employer failed to provide safe workplace because the excavated area is not barricaded. So not only ILO reference, you can bring in any reference here to justify legally. You can bring in a local regulation and quote it accordingly here, so that the examiner knows, yes, you know how to argue legally to take up your point to the employer to make sure that your recommended action will get through. And then financial arguments. You need to show here that if your recommended action is not taken care of, if the employer is not implementing these recommendations, what kind of financial losses he is going to face in case of accidents, in case of legal breaches, in case of penalties from the enforcing bodies. So all of these things you need to highlight. You are selling your product here, you are convincing someone to take actions as per your recommendation, so you need to be very strong in those convincing points, and you need to do the moral, legal, and financial arguments. Secondly, likelihood and severity considered for each action. You need to highlight here what is the likelihood. If this action is not taken, the likelihood of accident is more, and the consequence also. For example, the same thing which we are talking, excavation, if this recommended action is not taken care of, the likelihood is more that people will fall in the excavation, workers will fall in the excavation, general public will fall in the excavation, and the consequence is more severe in terms of injuries, fatalities, losses, financial losses, breaches, and all that. So you need to make your point more stronger, discussing likelihood and consequence if this recommended action is not taken care of, and if it is taken care of, what are the likelihood and consequences. For sure they will reduce. You have to provide an argument here for each selected recommendation out of those 3 recommendations. Then description of how effective the action will be in controlling the risk for each action. You need to provide 4-5 lines description down there that if this action is taken, then employer is going to get benefit out of it. Then there will be less non-compliances, there will be no penalties, there will be, you need to justify that he has to take certain action which you are recommending. In part 4, which is review part, review, communicate, and check. This is very important, guys. One of the common mistake people made in this area I have seen. Some people have written the review of this risk assessment as per company policy should be monthly. Okay, they have provided the information, but the examiner gave them criteria not met. Why? Because monthly is a very generic description. Even if it is monthly, today is what date and next month is same, when it is due, you need to provide that date. Okay, not simply writing monthly or quarterly or yearly. You need to provide the same date on which it is due next time. You can write it like this, that yes, as per the company policy, the risk assessment frequency is monthly, so the next review date will be so and so. So this is how you are going to complete. And reason for review date. Why so and so date? So most of the time the reason is, as per the company policy, it is monthly review. So the date I have selected for review is the same date which is due after a month. You need to justify this also. Indicate how the risk assessment finding will be communicated. This is very important also, guys. You need to tell the examiner how you are going to communicate the finding of risk assessment. I was looking at one of the report, and the guy has mentioned that I will call all the concerned parties and discuss with them my findings and risk assessment, and he got criteria not met. Then the examiner at the end, he put a comment that all interested parties or concerned parties is a very wide range. You need to tell the examiner who are the people whom you are going to communicate these findings. So within the organization, for sure, you are going to select somebody from the top management, somebody from the middle management, somebody from the bottom level, and these are the people who are the action parties most of the time, or decision making parties. For example, if the verification you are going to suggest, uh, it involves cost, you need to involve the finance manager, you need to involve the accountants, you need to involve the procurement department, you need to involve different parties. Also, the people involved in that activity, excavation activity, they should be there, they should know what is the issue and what is the solution. Also, the health and safety representatives and different parties, you need to make sure that you are highlighting all of those parties by name, okay, by their profession, by their job titles, and you need to convince the examiner that these are the people. I will be calling them for a meeting or whatever to discuss my findings. Now the communication methodology can be different. It can be a meeting, it can be sending them reports by mail, it can be a safety committee meeting, okay, it can be a regular review meeting, it can be a toolbox talk, depending on the people you are going to communicate with. If it is top management, you can send them risk assessment report by email, asking them their review and comments. If it is a middle management, you can conduct a meeting and call them in a meeting and discuss all of the findings. If it is a lower level, you can discuss it in daily toolbox talk and day-to-day daily safety meeting you can discuss. But for examiner, you need to provide them with your methodology, how you are going to communicate your findings of risk assessment, and indicate who the risk assessment finding will be communicated to. So this is covering the same point which we are talking. You need to tell them whom you are going to communicate and how you are going to communicate the findings of this risk assessment. The last point, indicate how you will follow up to check that the identified actions have been carried out or not. This is also an important area, guys. So some people have mentioned in a very simple way that I will keep continuous follow up and make sure that the actions are taken or not. No, you need to tell them how you are following up. So you will tell them, I will discuss these findings in weekly meetings, and looking at the deadline, I will make a methodology that before reaching that deadline, I will make sure that each party who is supposed to take action in that area has taken the action, and if there is any hurdle in taking action, I will support them, I will help them to find a solution. You need to convince examiner here that yes, you are really behind it and you want to take all of these actions accordingly. So this is how, guys, you are going to complete your risk assessment report, keeping all of these areas in mind, making sure that you are meeting all the checklist points one by one, and you are not providing very generic information in any area. Examiner can simply write one criteria not met and you are gone. So I am not making you afraid, but this is a reality. I am going to show you some of the feedbacks which we received from examiners, and you will see by yourself one criteria not met and a guy has failed. So friends, in front of you in this screen you will see one of the guy who failed, who got referred in the report. On the left side is the complete feedback from the examiner, and you can see at the bottom it is mentioned outcome refer. I've highlighted three areas in which he get criteria not met. And first one is each column of the risk assessment table has not been completed for each of the identified hazards. So as I was telling you that once you are writing a hazard, you need to meet all the criteria in 6 columns down there, and you are not going to provide very generic information. You are not going to miss out any of the additional action, and then what is the time frame required to complete that action and who is responsible. So looking at his report, I noticed that in the additional actions required or in the additional controls required, this guy mentioned 4 controls, and he put one party as a responsible party to take all of those controls in last column. Now examiner wants you to provide in front of each 4 additional controls you have suggested. You need to write all of those parties. Even if you are repeating, you have to repeat it. Maybe to provide excavation physical barrier, this is one control. Then you need to mention in how long you are going to take this control, maybe within 2 months. Who is responsible? Site manager, area manager, finance manager, procurement manager. So second control is to barricade the area temporarily until the physical barrier is there. So then again you need to provide same information in front of this also. So you should not miss out. You should not come up with one solution with one category in the column number 5 and 6. If you are providing 4 controls, you need to come up with adequately in front of each control. You need to provide this information. Secondly, action have been selected. Okay, this criteria was not met by this guy. Whatever actions he have selected down there, he failed to morally, legally, financially support the arguments or whatever, but this whole major criteria was not met by this guy. And then realistic review date given. As I told you, some people have mentioned the review date is monthly. This is not acceptable. You need to provide a date. So in a final feedback on the right side, you can see, unfortunately, the required criteria was not met in the following parts. Part 2 in column 5, the hazard category for fire has only 3 time scales given, and there are 8 actions. So 8 actions are there, but 3 time scales he provided only. So this action should be taken in a 1 week time. This action should be taken in 2 weeks time, 5 weeks time, 10 weeks time. You need to provide with each action the time scale. Part 3, the third action point was not given as a further control. In column number 4, part 2, you need to choose your action points from details you have included in column number 4, part 2. So this is another feedback for part 3. And then part 4, the review date seems to be incorrect. Even maybe if this guy might have mentioned a review date also, and on top if he's writing it is a monthly review, but down there he failed to calculate the right date. Again, you see, this is how this guy got a refer. So you need to be very careful. You should not be repeating these mistakes. That's why I'm showing you the real feedback of the examiner here. Guys, look at another feedback. This guy was a very unfortunate guy, I would say, and this guy could not meet one criteria only, and he got a refer. Okay, so if you look at on your left side in his feedback report, each column of the risk assessment table has been completed for each of the identified hazard. This criteria was not met by this guy. So in the overall feedback, the examiner mentioned point A. In column 5, you must give a suitable time scale for each of the further controls you have given in column number 4. The time scale was not given for some items. Also, you must give a specific time scale as soon as possible, or ASAP is not a specific time scale. So maybe for some actions he put simply ASAP. This is not acceptable. You need to provide a timeline within a day, within a week, within a month. You need to be more specific in providing time scale. In point B, examiner said similarly for each further control action given in column U, you must give details of the responsible person. In some cases, there was only details given for first item. Okay, the criteria was not successfully met in other sections. Just to save a little time, guys, people they are not mentioning in front of each control who is the concerned party, who is the action party, and they put on top only, and they keep the rest of the places empty. No, it should be met, then only you will be able to pass the report. So this guy was so unfortunate that he could not meet only one criteria and he got a referral. So make sure, guys, we learn lesson from all of these mistakes, and you are not going to be a victim of the same thing. You are going to submit a report which is complete in all terms. So friends, I hope things are more clear now. Actually, I was planning to give you another scenario to practice for NEBOSH IGC 1 today, but the moment I got these feedbacks from NEBOSH, I was thinking of people who failed in the exam because of very minor issues, and I was thinking of discussing with all of you to make sure that you pass in GC2 also, because this is a part of your exam. So guys, please make sure before submitting your report, I'm sure most of you might have submitted your reports already to your learning partners. If you can pull them back and make sure that you have taken care of these points, that would be much better. If not, anybody who has not yet submitted his report, then he should make sure at least that this checklist, point by point, is meeting your criteria or not in the report you have submitted. So hope you like the video, guys, and best of luck. Today is 27, tomorrow is your exam. So I wish you best of luck, all of you, to pass your exams with good grades, and thank you very much.